The Ahmed Kathrada Foundation has used the 7th Anti-Racism Week campaign to slam members of Operation Dudula for targeting undocumented foreign nationals. It further used the Sharpeville massacre to highlight challenges still faced in society today. Newzroom Afrika's Mbali Tetali with the details.
The Ahmed Kathrada Foundation has condemned recent attacks on illegal foreign nationals under the campaign Operation Dudula. Launching Anti-Racism Week in Sharpeville, the foundation's Nishan Bolton says this is a repeat of hatred and oppression that those who were killed during the 1960 massacre fought against.
From Sharpeville came global support from across the world to free this country. South Africans today are turning their backs against many of the people from other countries who reside in South Africa. We launch what is called Operation Dudula and other initiatives to chase them away in the most undignified and inhumane manner. We are repeating the mistakes of our apartheid rulers. We are repeating the mistakes of tyrants across the world who use issues like this to create hatred, to create division.
On the 21st of March in 1960, 69 people were killed and hundreds were injured in Sharpeville. They were protesting against oppressive pass laws. Joseph Khatebe, a social cohesion activist in the area, says the acts of Operation Dudula should not have a place in democratic South Africa.
Let's together act against Dudula. What Dudula is doing at this present moment is unhuman and it cannot be comprehended. There is no way that 27 years into democracy, people are still being chased, undignified, people are still being treated with no respect. It is your role as young people to change the discourse. You are the leaders of tomorrow. If you are unable to protect the democracy that our forebears had fought for, no one else is going to do that.
Many young people from the Ahmed Kathrada Youth Club attended the launch. Zahara Msomi from the club says young people should also play their part in the fight against racism.
We need to ensure that we fight racism at every single level that we see it. Be it something that we consider to be minor through speech or anything of that nature, be it in our homes, be it in our workspaces, be it at school, in any other place. We need to ensure that we do not allow racism to fester and to live on.
Anti-Racism Week is taking place during the month of March, which is also Human Rights Month, from the 14th until Human Rights Day on the 21st. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Mbali Tetani in Sharpeville.
A question has been asked, what problems does a movement like the Dudula movement pose for South Africa? Tonight, we have ANC Veterans League President, Dr. Snuki Zikalala, as well as political analyst, Prof. Diniko Maluleka, to help us in that conversation. You can be a part of this conversation tonight. WhatsApp your questions and your comments to 072-110-5584. You can tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. Here's a question for you. Does South Africa have a duty to share its prosperity with our African counterparts? Let's hear what your views are on that tonight. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Dr. Zigala, let me start with you. We are talking here out of that insert about the Dudula movement. A number of members of that movement are South African. They've taken an extremely restrictive view towards immigration. Some want a complete ban on entry to foreign nationals, while some want strict limits on the numbers allowed to enter into the country. Now, when you get a sense of why people are migrating to South Africa, there's a view that says migration into South Africa is a sign of South Africa's emergence as Africa's preeminent economic, educational and cultural center. But the question is, does South Africa then therefore have a duty to share this prosperity with our African counterparts?
Good evening, Thabo Mdluli, and good evening to your viewers. I think we as African National Congress believe that South Africa has the duty to share its prosperity with other African nations. And as you know, that ANC was not only formed for South Africans, it was an organization of all African leaders, especially in Southern Africa, who came and formed the African National Congress. But all that we are saying as African National Congress is that African people, especially from our continent, to come into South Africa in the sense that they have to be registered, not illegal. They have to be registered, and of course, if there are skills that we need in the country from our continent, those skills, they can be used and utilized in our country. But currently, what you've seen is that our borders were porous. We've got a lot of illegal and undocumented African people, and crime is rife. I mean, we're not saying that it's rife because of them. It's rife because most of them are not documented. There are no fingerprints. They've got no documents, and there's mass unemployment, especially African people, from especially black, colored Indians, and a few whites who are unemployed in the country. And so that's a problem that we are facing in South Africa. Yeah. And so what we are saying that South Africa has to acknowledge that the African people in our continent, they want to come and reside in South Africa, but they have to be documented. They have to be legal in our country. They have to abide by the laws, rules and regulations and laws of South Africa. They cannot do as they wish. We did not do as we wished when we were in exile. I lived in Botswana, Zambia, Tanzania, Angola. We did not do as we wished. We lived in camps and we are regulated. We are controlled by immigration officials of those countries. And so, that has to happen in South Africa as well. Yeah. And so we are saying that they are most welcome to live in South Africa, but they have to be documented. They have to be legal in the country. They have to abide by the laws of South Africa.
I'm going to come back to some of those issues that you are raising there, Dr. Zikalala. But Prof, let me bring you in here. Is South Africa duty bound to share its prosperity with its counterparts?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Dr. Zikalala on the points that he made. Of course, the question is whether South Africa has enough to share.
Yeah, that would have been my next question. Are we in an economic position to be able to have our borders opened up to whoever legally would want to come into the country?
Yes, so that is the nub of the problem, really. The problem is that, you know, the numbers don't lie. The South African economy all the numbers have been going in the wrong direction to start with. And as Dr. Zikalala has pointed out, the unemployment rate has gone highest than we have ever known it, at 34.9, if I'm not mistaken, at the moment. So there is a sense in which you could argue that if Operation Dudula did not begin the way it began, it would have begun anyway elsewhere by someone else, as it were. It is a function of the economic situation in which we find ourselves. It's the function of the numbers that we are steeped in. That said, it is also an opportunist organization. And I'm trying to use the word opportunist in the most positive sense possible, if it is at all possible to use that word positively. I call it opportunist because often when nations are at dire straits, like ours is at the moment, economically at least, not to speak of other sectors where we are in dire straits, then the temptation is huge for someone to seek to find a scapegoat. And so the immigrants coming from other African countries have become an easy scapegoat for problems that are really ours, that we have made and we have failed to address. Perhaps some we haven't made ourselves. We didn't have enough time to make all of them as a new democracy, but we haven't done enough to address them. So the curse of Berlin is that when African countries became independent, they maintained largely the borders that they inherited from the colonial masters. And once you become a nation state,
you relate to other nation states according to the rules that have been set by nation states, the international protocols. And the problem here is that perhaps in South Africa, the borders have been too porous for us to be really that nation state that was born out of the curse of Berlin. And as a result, we don't even know how many people who are non-South African are inside of South Africa. There's been a collapse of the immigration system. And all of these things do not, of course, solve the problem, but I think they point to the reason we have the problem that we have at the moment. The other thing, apart from the rules and regulations of being a nation state, is the question of human rights. And this being the month of March, where we celebrate human rights in our country, I think it was correct for the Catrada Foundation to remind us of where we come from and where we are going. We have signed up to all the international protocols relating to human rights, including the rights of refugees and immigrants. So we cannot now begin to act in a manner that undermines the human rights of our fellow human beings and fellow Africans.
Let's take a break. We'll come back. Dr. Sunuki Zigalala, Professor Dinyiko Malulega staying with us. We're getting your views also tonight. 072-110-5584. As we ask that question, is South Africa duty-bound to share this prosperity that is 5 ANC Veterans League President Dr. Sunuki Zigalala with us tonight, political analyst Professor Dinyiko Malulega, and of course we are tackling that conversation on restrictive view towards immigration in the country as expressed by organizations like Operation Dudula. Before the break, we were of course tackling that question: is South Africa duty-bound to share in its prosperity with the counterparts on the continent? But let's get back to this then, Dr. Zigalala. It is anticipated that that's exactly what you're going to say. You're going to say such exclusionary rhetoric should not be coming, especially from South Africa, and especially should not be directed to nations that harbored and nurtured comrades of the liberation struggle like yourself, providing education, providing sanctuary, providing sustenance. In fact, South Africa should be grateful to these nations and show a sense of comradeship. But this is not happening. The opposite actually is happening. And Professor Dinyiko Malulega is very kind. He owns the problem. He says it is our problem. But there are some who are saying politicians like yourself are not victims to this, but you are actually active participants that created this problem because your political agency became about yourselves and you forgot to be inclusive and bring everybody else on board.
Well, I would disagree with you that we became very inclusive instead of bringing everybody on board. I think, as Professor Dinyiko was saying, is that it is because of harsh realities of South Africans that some of them are reacting in a xenophobic manner. Because if you take majority of our young kids are unemployed, the unemployment rate amongst young people is more than 65%. And I think Operation Dudula is a very dangerous movement. Because they saw a gap in that. They started hyping South African emotions. And we are saying as the African National Congress, it's inhuman what they're doing. You can't stop old people just because you see the color of their skin, that they are dark, and you think that they come from another world. You want their IDs. They are not police enforcement agencies. They are not. And you can't just harass individuals in the street. You can't throw their goods, saying that they must not trade here. You are not the law enforcement agencies. And we, of course, as the African National, especially as the Veterans League, we are disappointed that the police have not acted swiftly against this, the Dudula operatives, because it's unacceptable, especially this month is Human Rights Month, that people are humiliated. You know, you saw one old woman crying, being humiliated. You know, irrespective where she comes from, but you can't humiliate another human being. And so I'm saying it's a very, very dangerous organization. And I think it's our duty, especially as the African National Congress, to educate our people. We're not saying that they're not educated, to ensure that they understand where we come from as an African nation, because we're an African nation and where we're going. It's unfortunate that our branches, especially the ANC branches, some of them are not functioning properly, because it's our branches at branch level where they are supposed to do door-to-door campaigns, inform people what is happening, ensuring people understand the relationship we have with our neighboring countries and why they are here. But of course, at the same time, we have to fix Home Affairs. We are grateful that Comrade Motsoaledi has started clamping down on immigration laws, making sure that he tightened our borders, he tightened our documentary areas, and of course, Comrade Tulas Nxesi came with regulations which are definitely going to regulate the employment of people who are coming from other countries. That's very, very important. But at the same time, I think we as the African National Congress, we failed the nation by making sure that, especially at our branch levels, where we are supposed to be the leaders of society, down there, where we're supposed to ensure and educate our people and make sure that such actions are not taken by other people, especially Operation Dudula. And so it's unacceptable. It's really it's inhuman what they're doing.
No, absolutely, and I think we are generally in agreement on the moral question. But the question really that I was putting to you, and in a sense you've already admitted in a sense to what I'm saying. You're saying, for example, ANC members busy fighting at branch level about positions, about their own prosperity, as opposed to going out and understanding that there is a 64% unemployment rate in this country that we need to address, more than just fighting between ourselves and fighting for positions. The mess at immigration, for example, people would ask this, a simple question to say, does immigration know what is the percentage of the South African population that is believed to be foreign? And what percentage of those numbers are perceived to be illegal? We don't have this information, but there are people who we have entrusted with the responsibility who went in and didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Well, I think it's up to the ANC, especially subcommittee that deals with the Economic Transformation Committee, and also a committee that deals with peace and stability, to ensure that the Minister of Labour and, of course, Comrade Motsoaledi, they must tell us what are they doing, because, of course, they've now introduced biometrics. With biometrics, you can be able to monitor who's coming into the country, who's leaving, what is he doing in the country, how many days has he been here, and they are able to track down. And so they've now introduced biometrics in some of our borders. For instance, I've traveled to Botswana before COVID. There was biometrics, which is good. But I'm saying that we have failed. We have failed society. We agree. But it's not lost at all. If our economy is not ticking, our economy is not growing, and at the same time we have the people who are illegal in our country, who are not documented in our country, and with this mass unemployment, of course this has to happen. And so, but we are not condoning it, and we are saying that it should not happen. Of course, we'll make sure that our Minister of Home Affairs tightens his department, make sure that he gets rid of those who are selling documents if they are, and make sure that every individual who's in this country is accounted for. That's what is important. If you go to Botswana, you go to China with 1.4 billion people, they know who is there in their own country. Immediately when you enter China, which is highly restricted, but they'll know exactly who's there. Same thing with Britain. Same thing with other countries in the African continent. And so we are saying that we have to tighten our immigration laws. We have to make sure that even the Department of Labour, it has come up with regulations of saying how many people can be employed who come from other countries in this industry. That's very good. That's supposed to happen. And so I think something is happening. We have to make sure that we bring about stability in this area. It's a very, very important area, and of course it's very painful for us as the African National Congress seeing how other people are being treated by this organization called Dudula.
Yeah. Prof, the doctor's already alluded to this fact that the feature of this sentiment has taken a racial form directed especially at black migrants as opposed to European migrants in the country. Can this be explained?
So it's difficult to explain it outside of the, the economic theory of competition for scarce resources. And obviously, when people compete for scarce resources, their neighbors are the nearest to them, and they will compete with those that are nearest to them, who live with them in the township, who trade in the township, and so on. But it's also true that the most vulnerable are easy to target. And Black and African people are vulnerable, and therefore easier to target by groups such as Dudula. It is also possible to consider the possibility of self-hate. That old notion that the likes of Steve Biko spent a lot of time explaining, where because you have been treated so badly, you end up believing all the lies about yourselves and about people who look like you. And it is possible to explain it also from that point of view. But I think much more important than explaining it is that it has to be stopped, because we don't want to go back to May 2008. And my fear is that as long as the kind of rhetoric that even some of our political leaders are joining, this anti-African foreign national rhetoric that is going on in the country, the danger of this rhetoric and this narrative is that it may embolden those who did what we saw 14 years ago in 2008 in May, when 62 people lost their lives, including among them 21 or 22 South Africans. We don't want to go back there. As a country, we cannot opt out of the human rights regime we have signed up to as a nation state. We cannot opt out of the international protocols that have to do with refugees and whether they are economic refugees or any other kind of refugee. We have to hold fort and play our role in protecting the dignity and the human rights of fellow human beings who enter our borders. Of course, we've got to tighten our border control. So we have biometrics and all these other, initiatives that are going off now. But as long as people can walk into the country in somewhere in a fence that is lying between South Africa and Zimbabwe, or between South Africa and Mozambique, or South Africa and Botswana, then whatever digital systems you might have will come to no avail. So we need to tighten up there, but we cannot opt out of what we have signed up. We are a country of a rule of law. We are signed up to all the international protocols that have to do with human rights and the protection of dignity of human rights. We can't wake up one day and say, because we are struggling, we are no longer going to respect any of that. And that's what organizations like Operation Dudula are actually doing.
We take your views tonight. 072-110-55844 for our guests, the president of the ANC's Veterans League, Snuki Zigalala, as well as Professor Diniko Malulega tonight. Otherwise, you can tweet us as well at Newzroom 405. When we continue next, we look at the implications of this on the regional cooperation as well as integration. But further to that, we also look at how this is beginning to manifest itself, particularly within the systemic processes of the state. So it is coming through via contact with, for example, police and home affairs officials. Stay with us. More on that when we continue. In conversation tonight with ANC Veterans League President Dr. Snuki Zigalala. We also have political analyst Professor Diniko Malulega. Prof, let's come back to you again on this one. Many African migrants, if you would ask them, they've begun to experience this restrictive tendency even in their contact with the state authority. They are saying, for example, it's coming through in their interaction with police. So they would be harassed on the streets by their neighbors, and when they go to the police would harass them even more. Or even when they go to Home Affairs, and they're saying they are harassed by Home Affairs officials. Is this surprising?
It's not surprising, but the real problem is not so much that the police harass them. I think the problem is that immigrants are not able to find a consistent message from the police. They find too many mixed messages. So the border control officers, for example, some of them are corrupt, and one would assume that some of the police are also corrupt. So if you go to the same office and one day you get one answer and the next day you get another, if the same official wearing the same uniform is unable to be consistent in the messaging that they give you, it can be confusing and quite stressful. And that's part of the problem that I think we need to resolve, so that the police and the border control officers do their job and not have to subject immigrants to the likes of Operation Dudula. So for me, of course, if the police are abusing immigrants, it can't be condoned. We have to condemn that quite strongly. But I also think, more importantly, the police must start to have one consistent, singular message and follow a particular protocol that is outside the scope of brown envelopes and money that is accepted at our border posts for people to come in, whether they should or should not have been able to come in. That's part of the problem that I think will make interacting with our officers quite stressful for immigrants.
Yeah. Dr. Sigalala, take a bite at that. You see, for example, you have South African citizens who believe that SADC citizens take jobs. That's one of them that we've dealt with. From locals, they commit crime. We've dealt with that. But there's also this sense that they are using the country's resources, health services, and so on and so forth. And then you get an official at a high position in government coming to say, yeah, well, we couldn't supply medication for you in this particular hospital because it's been taken, those beds have been occupied by foreign nationals. It surely does not help the situation that many South Africans are dealing with.
No, it's unacceptable for a superintendent of a hospital to say that he could not have beds in his or her hospital because of foreigners. A person who's sick, if you don't identify that person as a foreigner, is a human being. If he comes in at the hospital, especially public hospital, he needs treatment, he needs to be treated. And so they can't say that. It's unacceptable. Then it shows that there's lack of education amongst our own doctors. But what we are saying is that those who cross the borders to come in and give birth in the country, those countries must take responsibility of that. Of course, immediately the parents have given birth to the child. That's what Comrade Motsoaledi was trying to do, and when he was in the Ministry of Health, where he built all countries where their citizens used our medical facilities, because those are facilities that are meant for those who are residing in South Africa and South Africans, and those countries where people coming from African countries go and use our facilities, those countries must pay for that, must pay that debt, because our people who are going to this hospital, the money comes from our taxes. And so I'm saying it's unacceptable for them to say we could not get a bed because a person coming from Angola or from Zambia was using a bed. It's unacceptable, because a human being is a human being. If a human being is injured, must be treated, irrespective of where he comes from, irrespective of whether he's got documents or not documents. That's why we have to teach our people the culture of human rights. And so we are saying that, especially as Professor Tinyuka was saying, police themselves, they've got inconsistent messages, and the allegations that some of the police are corrupt, that there's money changing hands at border gates. One time, Comrade Motsoaledi went to Zimbabwean borders, where they found a number of border officials being involved in corruption. They were arrested. They must be arrested. I think they should be shamed and named and let them go to prison immediately if they take bribes. And so we should not accept police taking bribes, police taking brown envelopes. That's a culture which we have to inculcate amongst our civil servants. If there are those who are involved in malpractices and malfeasance.
Yeah, I must say it's not doctors who say that, Dr. Zikalala. It's for example, MECs and political heads in those various provinces who say, well, look, we have a burden in our hospitals because we have, of course, those resources being taken by foreign nationals.
No, but I think the African National Congress will condemn that. Will definitely condemn that. And those MECs who went about saying that we don't have beds because foreign nationals have taken your beds, it's unacceptable. If a person is sick, irrespective of where he comes from, he has to be treated. We, as Comrade Nyeko was saying, we have signed conventions with international laws. You cannot do that. And so if the MECs which have said that, the premiers in those provinces have to take them to task. Yeah. It's unacceptable.
And how are we tackling that conversation that you just raised to say, well, if, for example, countries know that they've got their nationals here in South Africa, there needs to be some financial support to assist, for example, the health resources in the country?
Well, I think that's a discussion that should be held with the Minister of Home Affairs, because he had started the initiative when he was the Minister of Health, and where he built a number of African countries, saying that so many people from Zambia, from Angola, from Mozambique were treated in our hospitals. He has a bill, and so he has to tell us exactly how far has that gone. It's a good initiative, and so those countries where there are citizens coming to our country, they get treated in the hospitals, they must take that responsibility. They are citizens, but we are saying that you can't chase them away from the hospital. But at the same time, those countries must take the responsibility and ensure that they compensate us for the health service that is provided to them by our health services.
Yeah. Prof, there's one part of the politics that say limit, complete ban, limit the entry. But there is another part that says these borders are superficial, they are man-made anyway. South Africa cannot afford to close itself out of the rest of the continent. This would be bad, for example, destructive for regional cooperation and integration. How does that add to this conversation?
Yeah, look, it's an important discussion, but I don't think it's a discussion that South Africa should have alone. This is a discussion that we should have at the level of SADC. This is a discussion that we should have at the level of the AU. And some progress around issues of trade has been made, where we talk about how to control goods and people in our borders, our common borders, given the colonial history that we come out of. I don't think it will make sense for one country alone to say we don't need borders when other countries are having borders, because what will happen is that countries will export their problems into one another. The more relaxed your borders, the more likely people are going to outsource all manner of things into your country alone. So I think it's an important, legitimate conversation, but it is one that we should have together as a group of African countries, perhaps regionally, but also continentally. Now, you know, the real danger that we are sliding into now is that I am beginning to hear political leaders, political bigwigs, political parties, starting to join the anti-foreign national narrative. The elections, the last local elections, have shown us that South Africans are quite upset and virtually fed up with the political system and the promises that they are being given. And with that pushback, what is likely to happen is that our politicians are going to become more and more populist. And what area to be populist in, that more fertile than the area you and I are talking about with Dr. Zikalala today, the area of immigration, the area of lack of jobs, and so that every little thing, politicians will now say, I will get the foreigners out, vote for me. Once we go down that route, we are in trouble because we are refusing to solve the problems that we have allowed to mount up over years, problems that we have created for ourselves by seeking a scapegoat. And once our political leaders take hold of that and they go in that direction, then we are in trouble.
Dr. Zikalala, as we wrap up, you're saying the best approach and the best remedy to deal with movements like Operation Dudula is law enforcement.
I didn't get that question.
I'm saying, you're saying the best way, because many people are saying, so how do we deal with a movement like Operation Dudula? How do we respond to the issues that they are raising? Are you saying the best way to deal with this is law enforcement?
No, well, I think it's immediately if they intimidate ordinary people in the streets, if they close their shops, if they ask for their IDs, the law enforcement agencies must deal with them. It's unacceptable because we have the police. That's the work of the police. You know, that's they have to deal with them. Why are they afraid of them? And so we cannot allow lawlessness in our country. We cannot allow vigilante groups to be established in our country just to target so-called foreign nationals. That should not be allowed in our country. And so our constitution does not allow us to do that. It's unconstitutional what they are doing. And as Professor Tinyeko was saying, they are opportunists. They are opportunist politicians who are using xenophobia rhetorics for them to get votes. It's unacceptable. I'm saying the law enforcement agencies must come hard on these individuals because they are doing the work of the police. The police have to monitor whether people are legal in the country, whether people have got license to trade. But they can't. Ordinary people should not be harassed by unknown individuals. They should not be harassed. Those Dudula people, they must go to school, get skills, and they're living on their own instead of going about marching and harassing foreign nationals. It's unacceptable.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on. Let's close with this tweet now coming through tonight at Newzroom 405. Nzaramo saying xenophobia has found a new name called Operation Dudula. Khadi, they have made a commitment into my life. I will never denounce myself against my fellow African brothers and sisters. Operation Dudula, let's fight crime, not nationality. I appreciate you, gentlemen, and thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for sending through your messages tonight here in Focus. When we